All right, welcome to CERTCon 2021, the virtual conference where we are celebrating you, the everyday CERT. Thank you for joining us at the 10th CERT conference in the National Capital Region. This session is the Public Information Officer before and after the storm. My name is Micah McDonald, and I'm joined by Peter McCarthy. We are your host and moderator for this session. Stephen Bosso is the Assistant Chief for the Twinsburg Fire Department in Northeast Summit County, Ohio, where he's been the Public Information Officer for over 30 years. Bosso was the Senior Shift Commander for the department for nearly 21 years and served concurrently as the Fire Chief of Ravenna Township for 12 years, where he authored grants totaling nearly $900,000. He has focused training in strategic planning, command and control functions, as well as incident management and public information officer roles. So now I'd like to introduce Steve.
Thank you for that introduction. I'd be remiss if I didn't do a shout out to Dana and Anita, two very nice individuals that I met way back in 2014 over at the Emergency Management Institute at a CERT trainer and program manager class. So been watching their careers during this time, and also want to thank Missy Tuttle-Ferrio for chatting with me and just facilitating, getting me started. And so I'm really glad to join you. A little bit about Twinsburg, just before I start this, because I was telling everybody, I didn't come up with a presentation for Twinsburg, but I do administer to the CERT team as well here. We're a smaller team in comparison to what you have there in Fairfax, Virginia, but we're a 20,000 population in our town, a little under 23 square miles, and we're 15 miles dead center between Cleveland and Akron. So we have the freeways and a lot of heavy industry, light industry, offices, and a lot of like residential areas. A lot of festivals. CERT keeps busy with those festivals, parades, and we have one very large one comes up every August. They weren't around last year, obviously, with COVID, but they're firing up this year. It's that Twins Day Festival, which just takes the town by storm every year. Hundreds of thousands of people crowd our town, and it's a neat festival. It's been around for dozens of years. It's neat to see all the Twins return every year. The interesting part is we have 1,000 acres of parkland, including creeks and ledges. CERT is integral in that aspect because they do a lot of search and rescue back there. People lose track of where they're at. They get hurt on the trails. So we do a lot of training back in those areas. And they've even GPS'd, one of the projects they did was to GPS all the locations where people can, there'll be a post and there'll be a GPS location on there with the long and latitude. So that was kind of a neat project for them. There's currently 65 members on the team. Of course, compared to your numbers, it's a pretty good reference to how big our city is. So they're very active in their membership. We got retired military, we've got retired police officers, fire department members, any walks of life you can imagine we have. And the interesting part over the last 4 years is we're getting the young adults who are coming out of college with emergency management degrees. So that's kind of neat. I do a lot of incident management training for the county, and I'm on the state incident management team as well. I run our county team. So obviously our CERT team is very, very well trained on incident command functions, including the T cards and all the incident command paperwork out of the ICS forms. We had a microburst a couple of years ago, which is we had a tornado too, but the damage from the microburst was even worse than the tornado was because it was the whole community. We lost power community-wide for like 5 days. But the compliments I got from our police chief and everybody was that the CERT team was most organized out of all of them. I was very proud of that. We knew where every member was at all time. We knew what they were doing, their functions, what comms they were on, and that sort of played into how we do our disaster planning here in Twinsburg. I do that as well for the whole city. Last year was kind of weird because I had to do COVID for the whole city. You couldn't go into a building without, getting your temperature taken, all that stuff. And we're still doing that here in Ohio, even though we did lift some restrictions, but it's nice to get back to normal. They're very heavily trained in search and rescue, like I said, with all the parkland. We have done that many times with people with dementia who walk away. We will not do them if it's a criminal activity. We don't send our CERT team into danger situations at all. So any law enforcement ones, the only thing we do with law enforcement is traffic control. They're heavily trained in first aid and triage. I know there was some guidance from the national level where they removed that from the curriculum. We're still looking into that with our state. State says go ahead and do it, but they do very good with the smart triage or SALT. Sorry. Disaster response. Remember, I am a assistant fire chief, so I don't participate with the CERT team. I'm doing my assistant police or assistant fire chief stuff here, and the greatest part about the CERT team is they self-manage. They're great at what they do. We have a team commander and an oversight committee. So those same people will run the incident, and I'll give them their orders or whatever tasks they need to do, and they get it done. And of course, we mentioned it as a command function. So there's some photos of what our CERT team in action training, and there's some more with some more training, and then obviously coupled with the road closures that they staff for the police department, who, by the way, loves that fact. They don't have to have a cruiser there. They just set a barricade up and our CERT members go right to it. So I'm proud of my CERT members. We have a lot of activities coming up. Memorial Day is coming up, so they do traffic control for the parade. And people know who CERT members are. They're like having a police officer there. I don't want to use the word obey, but they obey the commands of CERT. They're working for the police department, so they're in radio contact. So we do take care of them here. We make sure that they're safe. On to what I do now. I'm a public information officer, and I'm just going to leave this slide up here because this is a reminder to me on why I up my game. I've been a public information officer for well over 30 years. I was a photojournalist before that, before I became a firefighter. So I'm in my 30th year. You can do the math, how old you think I am, but I'm getting up towards retirement. But on July 13th, 2008, and we're a small department, police and fire. This is one of our police officers, Josh Matarian, who was killed in the line of duty. He was shot 4 times during a traffic stop, and he succumbed to his injuries on scene. This is my first time when I had to do the public information officer role in another discipline, meaning it wasn't fire or EMS, it was police. So I had to switch gears. This is like 2:30 in the morning. They just sent me a text and get into work, didn't tell me what it was about. Of course, I had my moment of emotions when I found out who it was. He was just a really young police officer. He had a 1-month-old baby at the time. His daughter Thea is now 13 years old, just gorgeous. But I had to run, people were sleeping here in Twinsburg. They didn't have social media, wasn't huge back as big as it is now. So when they woke up and watched the Sunday news, this is what they woke up to, that one of their police officers was killed in the line of duty. So I had to, in the wee hours of the morning, it's not like it wasn't all digital like it is now. I had to just gather all this information, his biography. We were making CDs or DVDs for the reporters. I had to plan a press conference. Had to come up with the speakers for that, what the rules of a press conference were, set it all up. It was very exhausting, very emotional. But after that day, I realized, I knew a lot about public information officer, but in the functions. But I decided then at that moment, after this, because there was after the funeral, to really up my game in education and started paying it forward. I became an instructor for the Ohio EMA. So Josh's death, I always put this up here just to remind myself that this is why I do it. So that's enough of that, I guess. What public information is if you want to call people to action, you want them to do stuff, right? If you want them to evacuate, you want them to stay in place, or you depending on what you want them to do, it's your way of reaching out to your community. You want to educate and inform them, whether it be smoke detector programs, There's a recall going on right now with the product out there. So we made sure we put that information out. There's a recall with some of the Kidda detectors. So we make sure that we educate the public on that. And just all sorts of safety things. And we call these, the gray sky days, or the blue sky days, where there's not a lot going on. It's the 95% of our work is when there's not an emergency or a crisis going on. And then we try to change behaviors or attitudes. If we have a burn ban here in Ohio, between fall and it just lifted in May, in beginning of May. We don't want people to open burn. We tell them why. So we're trying to educate them, change the behaviors, change their attitudes on whatever it is. We had a contentious levy on the ballot, our first time in history that we had a police and fire property tax. In Ohio, we rely heavily on income tax. And so we needed some more funding for just fire and police. So we had to change behaviors and attitudes on that. People didn't think we needed it, but we did a good job at promoting that. And we ended up passing it. So there's a lot of work on my end, but we hired a contractor to come in, people that specialized in public relations, and took some of the heat off me and some of my workload. So, and always create that and maintain a positive impression of your organization. You'll see later on my social media, we are heavy users of social media here in our city, not just the fire department, but the park and rec department, especially police department. The city has social media platforms. And we just make sure we put all this good stuff out there so people are aware where their tax money's going. They're showing that we're good stewards of their money, the hard work that our members are doing, whether it be training or doing, the good calls that come out, with the great outcomes, and even, some of the not so good calls that come out, whether it be a fire or something going on. So we always try to maintain a positive impression, and it comes into play later. Now, as a public information officer, and I'll show you a slide later on, it shows how high up they are in the incident command system, because if you've seen or taken any incident command courses, you know that there's a lot of branches and branch directors and chiefs and everything below the incident commander. Well, the PIO, they're right up there with the incident commander. There's liaison and there's PIO and then all the people below them. The PIO is so integral that they're part of the command staff. And they work with the incident commander to get the information flowing both ways. Here's what the public's saying. Here's what our people with boots on the ground are saying, and then in vice versa. You're letting people know what the incident commander want the community to know, or whatever the audience is. We call that messaging. We try to keep it to 3 to 5 messages at one time, and later on I'll show you how that's sometimes not the case. Sometimes you have more, and you collect and verify and disseminate. You disseminate is getting all that information out via different outlets, whether it's social media releases, video, radio, whatever. You have to get the information out, and you target the audiences through that communication. And of course, it begins with knowing your community. You have to know, what like I said, social media is by far the heaviest platform that people use. We have all sorts of different kind of alerting systems, electronic, but social media is by far the predominant means. And you have to break that down and knowing who's on those platforms. I did a research paper as part of my master PIO designation for FEMA, and the research shows Facebook by and large is the most popular one, then followed by Twitter and Instagram in that order. There's other platforms, we don't use them because there's just so many moving parts to them. But on Facebook, my mom's 92, she's on Facebook. I know that the people in her age group are on there. The kids are not on Facebook. The kids are on Instagram and Twitter. I reserve Twitter is what I use to reach our media. All of our media outlets in Cleveland and Akron, and they call it the greater Cleveland area. They all follow my work account, the Twinsburg Fire account on Twitter. So I don't have to send a fax. I don't remember the last time I sent a fax, or an email press release, I'll just send a tweet with a photo and some basic information, and that does two things. It gets them headed our way if there's a call that they're interested in or an event, and it also stops the phones from ringing in dispatch or the fire department or police departments. Because back in the day, you sent a press release out and people wanted more, because by the time that press release got to you, it was already dated. So, and what I tell everybody when I'm teaching these courses is, if you don't take advantage of that social media, you're really doing yourself a disadvantage, because they're already telling your story. Somebody else is telling your story out there, whether it's a member of the public or somebody else, and they may not get it right. Okay, so it's important that you start early. And it's complicated for me because I am a multi-role PIO. I have to do my assistant chief stuff first before I put my PIO hat on. So I got to make sure the guys and gals are safe. They have their equipment, what they need, their resources, and then I'll put my PIO hat on. And of course, when I'm at home, I live and sleep, PIO stuff. Talked about that. And the goal, this is a FEMA quote, the goal is to get the right information to all the right people at exactly the right time, so everyone is empowered to make the right decisions. You're notifying them because you want them to do stuff in a timely manner and make those right decisions. Shelter in place, evacuate, go to this evacuation center. Are you prepared? And we do use emergency alerts here in our city. We have digital ones. We have digital signage. We have automatic alerts you can sign up for. And of course, there's iPause, which is the integrated public alert warning system that from the White House down, they use that if there's a major disaster or major news going on. Talked about community awareness. I have to know a lot about our demographics. And I gave you a little brief overview of what Twinsburg is, so I don't need to go over that again. How does the government work? We also cover the Twinsburg Township, which is a board of trustee form of government instead of the city council. We have a mayor. It's not a ceremonial mayor. He's a mayor strong. So he actually is our boss. Some mayors, they have a city manager that actually calls the shots, and the mayor, they call him a ceremonial, or him or her a ceremonial thing. So you have to know how the government's set up. Who the key players are in the organizations, and that's all organizations in your community. From the school board, the superintendent, school board members, the board of trustees of the township, the city council people. I have everybody's cell number. We text back and forth, back all the time, and just to keep that information going back and forth. I mentioned that we had our high school senior parade today. So of course the school board president's like, "Are you all set?" We had the police chief chiming in, going, "Okay, these roads are closed, because it clogged up our roads." So, and it's just a normal daily routine for us to stay engaged, and we create partnerships. The city needs the schools need the city, the township needs the city needs the town. It just keeps going. So we keep those partnerships going, and we keep everybody updated. I know a lot about our history in Twinsburg. I can tell you that it was named Twinsburg because there's a set of twins that gave a bunch of land to the community, and we were called Millsville back then. And the Wilcox twins are actually in the Guinness Book of World Record. They're actually died on the same date, married twins, and they're buried in the same grave. Sounds morbid, but that's the truth. Their grave is downtown and in our old cemetery, and the twins flocked to that place during our Twins Day Festival because that's why Twinsburg was named. Our culture always, it's always changing. Our demographics are changing here, whether it be the age of our residents or the ethnic makeup. And when you have to do any kind of information in an emergency, you may have to get interpreters in and know what languages are being spoken. And what I do is I just go to the school district and go, what are the languages? And there's 25 languages spoken in Twinsburg, 25. I was just blown away by that. Now, we can't facilitate all of those languages. I can't find some of the translators for some of the ones, maybe the 1% of the population, but we can get translators. We have a heavy Russian presence, a lot of Spanish speaking community members. So we don't forget about them. And this comes into play later when I went on a disaster down in South Carolina, how we really had to embrace the Spanish speaking community down there. So just always know the culture. I talked about that 95%, that blue sky, and this is saved for the day-to-day public awareness campaigns. If you're doing the math, yes, it adds up to 101%. The 5% is for emergency notifications. So, there's a fire, there's a traffic accident, you want to avoid the area, there's a storm, or there's a tornado, you want to get that emergency, notifications out. The 1% is internal communications. We reserve that for, what happens if something happens inside your organization. Could be bad news, and in that case, you have to own it. You have to embrace it. It's yours, whether it, and most of those are really bad. And I'll show you a slide later on that has to do with that. And a lot of these slides have shown you a lot of their social media, because we are so heavily using social media in our town. I talked about our partnership with the schools. We have a great artist on staff here at the fire department. He's a great graphic artist. So he does these logos. Our soccer team for the girls, the high school girls, they made a run at the state playoffs. They lost in the last game, but we were showing our support, whether it was the digital signs or on social media or whatever. And you can see that it's the Tigers, and there's 2 twin tigers in the logo, twin tigers. And he designs these things for the schools. Of course, we got the school's permission because they own the copyright for the tiger. So I had to sign a document that said, we're going to treat the tiger. We're not going to put the tiger in a bad way. He's not going to have a can of beer or anything like that. He's always going to be good, doing wholesome stuff. So, and that satisfied them. So we were free to use the tiger whenever we need to. Some more partnerships that we talked about. It's one of our police officers lending us a hand at a fire, giving auction to a dog. That helped us, and it helps the police department. And it shows that we do carry those auction kits for pets. So it did that posted very well. And it just one of those, like I said, 95% things that it's all the good stuff. And the one on the right, it's one of our members who was off duty at a restaurant and saved the gentleman's life doing CPR at a restaurant. So we made sure that we celebrated his activity and his, heroic deed. It was a heroic deed. The gentleman is still around because of him, because of one of our members. So anytime you get the chance to promote your organization, do it. It just benefits everybody, the organization, the community, and the personnel. We always try to talk up our personnel. We talked about those changing behaviors. The one on the left is just, we get a lot of snow here up in Northeast Ohio. I don't know about Virginia, but we get a lot of snow here. And sometimes the water will back up because the drains and the roads. And this is a small little thing, but it meant a lot to the service department because the roads flood if these drains are blocked. So we use a lot of emojis. This is we don't use a lot of emojis on Facebook because grandmas don't get, emojis, but Twitter and Instagram do get them, but we did throw it in there. In fact, the one on Twitter, we had a picture of a clown in there. If you knew that clown, that horror movie with the clown. So we put him down in the sewer too. We try to change behavior, the move over. That's one of our ongoing ones. We have a freeway going through town. We don't want our members killed or injured. We don't want the tow truck drivers or Department of Transportation or police officers, anybody injured during a traffic accident or a car fire or even a mechanical issue. So it's the state law we have in Ohio, move over, slow down. So we always promote that. If you can, I don't know if it's too small, but you can see how many people this thing reached in a short time. It's not how many people like your stuff, it's how many people it's reaching. That's how you look at your analytics and see how your activities, all your posts and social media activities going by those analytics. So we don't use the boost feature. I don't have to spend a dime on this stuff. It gets a lot of shares. That one on the bottom at the time I put it out, at 252 shares, that's a popular one, and we call that sort of going viral. And we've had big ones that went even more viral, like our police canine went to Starbucks, got a puppuccino, and that thing just went crazy. In fact, they did this is way before it became popular. He did it like, it was like, oh God, 8 years ago, but it was millions and millions and millions of views. It was amazing. And it was great for our police department. They enjoyed that. And I'm sure Starbucks did too.
Steve, Dana says that we have the adopt a hydrant policy here.
Yes, that's a great, we do the same thing. We don't sign people up, but we when we got the hydrants, we have graphics for that too. I don't think I have a copy of it. It's just I put a thought bubble over a hydrant on a graphic and said, oh, this stinks, you know, because he's covered with snow. So people, it's kind of neat because people will post it on their own. We have these community groups within Facebook. There's two groups, one that hates everything the city does and the other one loves everything the city does, and they don't like the other group. So we call on both those groups in time of emergency, but the other group, well, they'll boast about how many hydrants they got. It's kind of cool. And it really does help us out because it really does save time with the fire department on, you know, we do carry shovels, snow shovels on those rigs, and we get those heavy snowstorms, and to dig it out and find it, you know, at the shore. So that's a great program, that Adopt a Hydrant. This is that 5%, the gray skies, stormy days, no pun intended. I guess there was a pun intended because it was a stormy day. This is from that market burst I talked about. And this is, I live in town. So remember, I had to make sure that my house was safe before I took off, left my wife there, you know, the power was out. I had to check my residence, make sure there's no trees laying on it. And then I had to go through my neighborhood to get to the fire station. And I could see there was trees all over the place. And a microburst, we have this phenomenon here, and I think everybody knows what a microburst is, but it's worse than a tornado because it was our whole 20 square miles was affected. We had power lines down that did get repaired for 5 days. We had out of state, you know, Illinois and Indiana and Michigan power companies in town trying to fix our power. So this was actually done in my driveway. This went out on multiple formats. I did one post and I shared it over to Twitter and Instagram all at once at one time. And just the major thing, I even did all caps because I was yelling. I wanted people to know this is serious. There's no shelter. There's no power at our fitness center, which is the shelter. Shelter in place if you can. You know, you can read it. Stay away from down power lines. It's way beyond that 3 to 5 key messages, but those were the important things. And we wanted to make sure people checked on their elderly neighbors because they may not have social media or cell phones. We can't forget about that. People assume that everybody has cell phones. That's not the case. You know, there's some grandmas in our town that still have the rotary phone on their wall, and that's how they communicate. So we were just getting that information out, and that got shared really rapidly. You know, 109 shares within probably 15 minutes. And I mentioned all the other social media accounts the city has, and we in our plan, since my role is not just with the fire department, I'm the city public information officer as well. We all pointed all the information to the fire department page. If you had a question, the fire department would answer it, and then it would be the same answer on all the platforms. They would repost it on whether it's the golf course page or whatever, you know, park and recs. They all shared the same information. So there's one source, one message, or in this case, 6. Some more gray sky stuff where we have house fires. We want people to avoid the area. Just, hey, stay out of the way, let our crews work safely. Same with our freeway. This particular one was, you know, actually a member of the community actually sent me this. I wasn't on scene. He sent me this from an overlook. There's a bridge going to their freeway. He lives right there. So he actually sent it to me knowing that I would do this. And it got 128 shares within like 20 minutes. Because it was rush hour. People wanted to know why they couldn't get on the freeway. Here's why. It was a bad semi-accident. So, and it really helps us, and it helps the motorists too. You know, hey, I better not go this way. They don't even leave their house yet. They go, I better find an alternative route. So whenever we can change, you know, people's, you know, not change their plans, but get them to make alternative ones just to stay, you know, one, not be late for work or wherever they're going, but to stay out of a traffic jam, or better yet, to keep us safe on a scene. We'll promote that. that internal crisis. This is, like I said, we're a small community. I've already shown you one. We had a police officer killed in the line of duty. Well, this is one of those not so good ones. We had one of our members who was a rock star here. He was a great fire medic. And I was out of town when this happened. I had to come back from Indianapolis, very fast to manage this incident. He snapped. He murdered his fiance and killed himself in front of the Akron police. He lived in Akron. And you can see the picture on the right. This was People magazine. So this went nationwide. And it's one of those things we own it. It's our employee. We had to, we had to, how did we manage this? Well, the Akron police department did the investigation. They helped us out tremendously. I wasn't in town, so my backup PIO, the Akron police department, really embraced him because we have a relationship with all the PIOs in Summit County and steered him in the right direction. There's nothing we could do to change this. There was people that were very angry with us personally. They don't think we did psychological and all this other, reviews on people before we hired them. We do. We can't explain this, but we owned it. It was our employee. And I guess the only saving grace, and there probably shouldn't use that word, is there was no trial. We didn't have to relive this. It was over that night. So we made sure that we embraced the family as well, because we met her kids. They were engaged. So this is a very sad affair. We decided to go dark. This happened on Thursday night, like really early Friday morning. So we had no social media presence at all. We didn't do anything on social media. And that was intentional. That was citywide. And we let whatever actions played out in the media, the newspaper articles, all that. We were getting hammered on social media. And by law, you're not allowed to delete those comments unless they swear or curse or do something that's really bad. But then, for our law director, and this is actually one of the state laws, is we can only archive those comments. We can't really delete them because they were put on a public platform. But then the interesting thing happened during that week is somebody posted on one of those community pages, hey, we're thinking about the fire department, just hope everything's okay over there. And just the response, we had nothing to do with it. And the response, it was just so organic. People were, I hope they're doing well. And it was just nice to see that the public remembered us too, that we were struggling as well. We were grieving as well, along with the families, because, it's a small community. And that really took a lot of people by surprise. But I guess not surprisingly, because we're a tight community here. We all always come together. But this was one of those, the next slide will tell you, like I was saying, you tell the truth, you tell it all. Tell it first and tell it fast. And this is from a man, Bruce Hennis. And he does Hennis Communications. This is his motto. And I have permission to use this because I've had him here to speak to all of our executive assistants and administrative assistants, probably 30 of them with all the departments. And because they're the ones answering the phone if something happens. So we had him come in for a special 2-hour segment on, crisis communications, and how to handle, the irate people, the people that are, how to point them in the right direction. So Bruce Hennis is the master around here. He's done stuff all over the country, but remember, I don't know if you can recall the man from Cleveland who kidnapped and kept 4 girls in his house for years. Bruce Hennis actually managed all that. They self-rescued. And instead of the media being let loose on all these girls, because the media was international media then, Bruce Hennis actually did a video of all 4 of them in a pleasant setting, overlooking Lake Erie, and just had one person interview them, and it answered all the questions. It got to see the girls, in a new light because they were rescued and they were no longer suffering under this guy. So they really did a great job with that, and it saved them from being hounded by the international media and the national media. And I tell everybody, you have these incidents where the national media comes in, and I always tell people, remember, when I'm teaching this course to new public information officers, is don't forget that when the national media leaves, your local media is still here. So don't get starstruck with, the the national media that comes in, like Geraldo and all the others. Never give them a scoop you wouldn't give to anybody else. You have to give everybody the same information. Don't treat them any different, because at the end of the day or another week, those people are getting on their planes, going back to New York or Atlanta or wherever they're from, and you still need your media partners, your local media partners, whether it's print, electronic, meaning TV, or radio. And never, ever, ever forget radio, because radio is so important, and people in their cars want to know what's going on. If your power is out and you have a radio still that runs on batteries, right? We're CERT members. We teach people to be prepared. That's where they're getting their information, is from the radio. So never forget about radio. You have to know a lot about emergency management, how everything works with all the moving parts. Know the basic emergency management concepts, how the incident command system works, and how NIMS works, National Incident Management System, how it all integrates. And this comes into play later because, I can run a great scene locally. I know everything about it. Then you start getting into the county, state, and then federal. Some of those rules shift over, but the incident command system's built to be scalable, like it's in their model, that it all integrates well together, and it can start very small and ends up huge. And I'll show you some slides later where I was actually on a national deployment. And it just having this training, and I don't know if Fairfax County has their members do some basic incident management systems like 100, 200, or 700, 800, but that it's a good idea to have some of your members go through that training so they can plug into the incident command system when they need to. Sorry, I had to take a sip. On-camera interview skills, you have to use sound bites, when you get interviewed, and you have to know these techniques, and you get interviewed, remember who the star of the story is. It's not you. It's going to be the reporter making all that money. So whenever they package up a news story, they may have shot 4 minutes of you, but you're not getting 4 minutes on the news. Sorry, you're getting 30 seconds of sound bites and maybe a last thing at the end. So you just, if you know they're coming to see you regarding a story where they called you or you called them, have some sound bites in mind. They changed the fireworks law in Ohio, and I have a buddy, this is like 4 years ago, I have a buddy who actually works for our big Fox affiliate out here, and he goes, "Hey, I'll be there in 15 minutes." I'm like, okay, I had to read a 65-page document in 15 minutes, and I came out with a really good, okay, nothing, the major law change wasn't really that major. Each municipality can govern themselves. And we wanted to caution people, one of the things in there was you couldn't be under the influence of any drugs or alcohol while you're setting these fireworks off. So my soundbite was, if you're at a party all day and, Uncle Bob's been drinking all day, maybe he's not the one that's shooting off the fireworks. And that's actually the soundbite they used. But it reached everybody. They go, "Oh, yeah, you don't want drunk Uncle Bob setting off these fireworks." So that's a example of a soundbite. You make good eye contact. If you've probably seen all the Zoom type interviews, the rules have changed with that now, because there's a lot of, I don't think you're going to see that go away when it comes to being interviewed, because it's not just the COVID thing. They found out they saved a lot of money by sending, nobody. They can just do it on Zoom. So in that case, you have to look at your camera, right? So, but when you're being interviewed by a camera person, if they do send them out, you're not looking at the camera. You're only looking at the reporter. You're having a conversation with that reporter like he's your friend, she or he is your friend. And you only look at the camera when you want to look into the soul of the viewer. Like I say, if you want them to leave, or you want them to, don't forget the smoke detectors. You got to change the batteries. Look right into the camera and tell them, because that way you're looking at grandma. She's looking at her TV and you're looking right at her. I talk with my hands. Just the way I am. I talk fast and I wave my hands. And when I'm being interviewed, I talk slower and I grasp my hands below my waist so I don't wave them unless I want to gesture. So know when not to answer. I'm not a lawyer, but here's some lawyer advice. When you see the reporter pull in, and until you see him pull out, shut up. Don't say anything. That's not part of the interview. because the first thing you're gonna do is put a mic on you, okay? And you can have a chit chat with them, and that stuff's all it's open mic, it's recorded, or with a live thing, it's even go to a live feed somewhere. So don't say a word that's not part of the interview. And if they're there for one story, if you know there's something else brewing somewhere else within the city, and you just hope they don't ask that question, have an answer for it anyway. Whether it's, no, I can't answer that now, and here's why. But just always have an answer, because you don't want to get blindsided. Public speaking, you know, I have a very loud voice. I dial it down when I'm doing like an interview, and I try to engage the audience. The one thing I do miss is being in the classroom and being at conferences and being a public speaker. And we're doing a lot this way, you know, through virtual. So I had to embrace it. I had to learn it. We found that we're teaching online now with our state, the Public Information Officer series, and it benefits us because now we're getting people from different states coming instead of people driving. Where we used to have 15 people, and of course we're getting 40 now. So there is benefits. We're educating more people. The only thing is we can't do is like the press conferences, you know, when we teach them how to do that. And there is an art behind how to do a press conference. We're missing that part because you need people together to do that. So you need some oral communication skills. And this is a picture of me down in South Carolina. I'm just doing sound checks. I wasn't in front of the camera down there. My role was I worked for the state. Then I was loaned by the state of Ohio and the city of Twinsburg to help their communications manager manage all the communications from Hurricane Florence. But what I'm doing up the podium now is sound checks. As all the media came in, I had a script up there just reading stuff so they can do their sound levels on their sound equipment for live shots or whatever. Because the governor would get behind that mic in about 10 minutes.
Steve?
Yes.
John has a question for you. He says the CERT standard organization doesn't map exactly to the ICS standard. Can you comment on the integration of CERT responders into local, state, federal ICS and the Unified Command Response Organization?
Well, I can't speak for your organization, but I know ours in Ohio, we follow underneath the Ohio EMA and the Summit County EMA, because they're our you know, they oversee our CERT team. I'm the administrator, but the rules and standards come from FEMA. So it benefits us and behooves us to know that incident command system. So we're not the only CERT team that does that in Ohio. Maybe, I don't know if the rules in Virginia are different, but we do integrate with that incident command system. You have to follow under the guidelines of the incident command. You can't do your own thing. Now you're probably doing ICS now, but just aren't realizing it. But there are plenty of courses online that you can take them, and they're free. All of them are free. So my advice is to take maybe 1 or 200 in ICS, 100 or 200 or 700 and 800. And if you really, really love it, you can go to the sit down classes for 5 days, that's 300 and 400. And you really got to love it that. And then there's also the courses after that, but it's integral to running a command, running a scene, a successful one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And there's 15 minutes left. Just give you time.
Yeah, I should be able to get through this.
Okay.
Credibility and relationships means that you have to provide information to the newsmakers. You may have to do your own stuff. Like I said, this is me actually doing a story for Channel 19. The cameramen, they're not just camera people. They're actually videographers. They're video journalists. They went to journalism school. They are reporters as well. But he was so trying to ask me questions. He goes, "Here, just take the mic and tell me what's going on." So I was his reporter on the scene during one of our big training burns. And I just gave him a lot of education. So you may have to step into those roles, okay? The only thing wrong with this photo up here is I got sunglasses on. You're not really supposed to have sunglasses on when you're on camera, but I broke my rule because it was just a bright day. Just forgot I had them on. You have to know how the media works, what they're we used to call it deadlines, but there's no deadlines anymore. It's 24-hour news. Even in the newspapers have websites. Radio stations have websites. So the news cycle, it just keeps going. So I always make sure I get back to people as soon as possible for any updates. Now, the good thing about having newspapers have websites is you can read the story online before it hits the print. That comes into play with like a morning paper or even our community weeklies that come out. If there's a problem with the article, you can call them and tell them, hey, there's a problem with this article. You know, you might want to change it before you hit the press. And that works out very well. We talked about the deadlines and having those open dialogues. I have a lot of friends that are in the media here as well. And, a couple of them I'm social with, but I don't give them anything I wouldn't give to their competitor. And that's just one thing they know I won't do. There's no such thing as, if they want to scoop, they got to find their own. They're not going to find it from me. Here's what I'm talking about with the incident command system. Look where we are. Look where they're right down below the incident commander next to the liaison officer, above the safety officer, and then all your other branches open up below that, the ops section, planning, logistics, finance. There's comms. Everything is underneath that. So that's why the PIO role is so integral in these command scenes. And you have to advise the incident commander at times, and then it's, like I said, a two-way street. All the information goes both ways. You got to manage on-scene media and public inquiries. So I'll be monitoring social media from my phone or from my car. The MBT in my car that also has web capabilities. So I'll see what the perception is out there and correct it, or put out facts instead of conjecture. If there's conjecture out there, you try to address it really quick and turn into what the real facts are. And we talked about that unified message. I'm not giving my own messages out. These are, it's a commander or whoever's in charge. What do you want the people to know? If it's a police thing, it's very limited. They do very little of information release because they have different rules and laws about investigation. So, but you try to get as much information out as you can, even if it's just, hey, there's no information right now, no new information, but we'll get back to you. And then the key to that is make sure you get back to them. Okay, this slide just is supposed to indicate, we talked about PIOs. Well, now you got a joint information system. What that is just, I'm a fire guy, but there's also the other PIOs out there in the public sector. You got health department, you got Department of Transportation, utilities. But this photo is supposed to indicate, who do you think would be a PIO by looking at the slide? And it's not, in a classroom setting, we would ask people to shout them up. I'll just give you a few hits. There's a tornado coming. So you got the National Weather Service, there's power lines, you got the utility departments. You got agriculture with all the apple trees. You've got agriculture again with the cattle. You've got roads, so you've got the road department. So that's just 6 or 7 PIOs that you'll have to get together, right, to all come up with unified messaging regarding this tornado. And I show you the slide because how many PIOs you think you'll need for this? And the answer is hundreds of them. This is Hurricane Florence. This is one I got deployed to before the hurricane. I was on the road and got there before the hurricane hit. So I got to do before, during, and after PIO stuff. And each day was different. So I can tell you that you had the state and the counties and all the municipality, all their PIOs. You had police, fire, you had Department of Transportation, you had National Weather Service, you had the Coast Guard, you had the Armed Services, literally hundreds of PIOs. So my job was to go down there and work with the state communications director and work in a joint information center. And that's a place. The system is the method, the center is the place. So I went out there and was their JIC manager and helped them do the media relations, media analysis, which is, seeing what's being said, hearing what's being said, watching what's on the news, checking social media. So you're trying to, to analyze all the data coming in. And we actually had one of the universities down there, Clemson, actually monitored the media for us and gave us a detailed description every day. And they even had a Waffle House thing. This is not this is a true thing. They can tell by the severity of what's going on, by how many Waffle Houses are open. And we actually use that in the government to see how bad the situation is. We check what's going on in field operations, what's going on with their social media. That's all social media throughout the county, state, and federal levels. Special event and projects, we had to do PSAs, and I'll go more into that. We had to monitor all the media conferences, whether they were at the state level or at the local level. At the time I was down there, Myrtle Beach really wanted to open up because they needed tourism. Well, the flood hadn't come yet, so they couldn't open up. So we were monitoring their social media. You know, they're saying, come on down, and the Department of Transportation saying, no, there's no roads to get there. And please do not come down. So it's kind of this weird battle. You had your popcorn out, and you're seeing who's going to say what next. And then with the administration, I worked, you know, the governor figured out that I wasn't from Cleveland, Tennessee. I was from Cleveland, Ohio. So I worked that close with those people down there, and it was a really neat experience. This the one on the left. This is her name's Carrie Haverfield. She actually is from Colorado, and she was EMAC'd as well, Emergency Management Assistant Compact. That's how I came to be there. The state of Ohio lent me to the state of South Carolina. The state of Colorado lent Carrie to the state of South Carolina, and they were reimbursed. We were reimbursed for all of our travel, and FEMA paid us our wages. This is a hallway where we turned into the media center. They were all doing their editing right on site. You know, no more of this, you know, running back a tape back to the station. They do everything right there digitally. My job was to make sure that they had everything they needed and to escort them safely throughout the Emergency Operations Center. And this is a picture of part of that center. This is that room I was in, the conference room, which is they did all the media conferences. That's the governor in the middle of the photo on the bottom. And you can see all the media just gathered in there. It's a small room, but you had, remember all the dogs in the hunt, all those people back here. You had Army, you had National Weather Service, you had everybody in that room so they could answer questions. The military was heavily involved. So top left is the military branches all giving their input. The one on the right is it's the PIPS line, Public Information Phone System. They were getting inundated with calls because there was people that needed to know where the evacuation routes were, where the disaster centers were, where you can go for a shelter. So our goal was to stop those phones from ringing, and we did a pretty good job, and I'll go into how we did that. This is more pictures of the SEOC, or the Emergency Operations Center. It's a very large room. It is like it is on TV. You know, it's huge. I couldn't even get the whole thing in there. Hundreds of people working in 12 to 14-hour shifts to manage this disaster. And Florence was unique because it was a very slow hurricane that produced a lot of rain. So even when the hurricane was over, we had to wait 5 days for the floods to come. So there was a lot to do during that time, you know, and our messaging had to shift. And here's that. I talked about the 3 to 5 messages. Look at the board on the left. This is one day. These are all the messages we had to get out. A little archaic system. We used a color coding on which was Facebook, which was Twitter. They since, after the after action, switched over to electronic version. They have this on a monitor now. But these are all the messages we had to get out there. Okay, then just keeping the whiteboard updated, and then having all your press releases that go out. Very few press releases. There's probably maybe 9 up on that board, because everything was done electronically, either through the media or through social media. Some daily briefings. That's me giving the report out for what we did during the day for my 12 hours. We used WhatsApp. That's that thing on the right. We still use that in our public information work group up here in Ohio. There was like 30 PIOs dialed into this. And from when President Trump came down, we had to get that all arranged and who's going to be where and what. This is the war room in the left, over the left-hand side of the picture there. That's all the chiefs from the incident command system. And in the center of the picture is Brock Long. He was then the director of FEMA when he came in. We did a lot of infographics, memes, and emojis, okay? just did a lot of information sharing. You know, people were driving around barricades. So we tried to reach those different demographics. You could teach people, you can tell people in the news or in a press release don't to drive around the barricades. But when you have people like the millennials, and I'm not trying to single out any age group, but you know, they were heavy users of social media. So our focus was them, you know, and people that actually use social media. So they would, you know, use the popular memes that day and just adjust them to what we were doing with the disaster. You know, we want them to you know, like I said, not drive around barricades. Don't walk through the water because there's bad stuff in there. I didn't know who Cardi B was until I went down there. I guess that's Cardi B on the right when she was a kid, but that was a popular meme. But these things became viral within the state of South Carolina, and we got a lot of great compliments on it.
We have about 2 minutes left, Steve, on the
Okay, I'm gonna run through this real quick. Okay. We had to do PSAs all from an iPhone. We had to do PSAs, and we had to do them for the in sign language, and you can, if you read the one on the right, it's in Spanish. So we had to do both. There was that disaster app that they had. They had 40,000 people before we got there. Almost 250,000 by the time we left after the disaster. Their phones stopped ringing almost after we got that app publicized. So that was a big critical thing that we had to promote. We promoted leadership down there. There's the governor. There's me petting a dog. I escorted the media through their overflights. That was another part of my job. So I got to see firsthand, you know, the damage down there. And then I was demobilized and got a selfie with Brock Long. But PIO role was very exciting for me. There's some of the stuff that you can follow. And I'll leave this up as my last slide. There are courses out there for PIO. You can start at the state level and do your G289 course, which is an awareness course. Then you can go in class for the 290, 291 series, which is 3 days. And if you pass all that, or when you pass all that, you go on to the advanced course, which is 5 days at EMI, Emergency Management Institute. And if you really, really love it and you like graduate level work, you become a master PIO through their program there. And they just graduated their last class. So there's like 80 of us throughout the United States that have their master PIO designation. It was a lot of work, but it was just very, you know, fulfilling for me professionally, and it really upped my game. But there's some of the bottom part of my personal ones. You know, I just started TikTok personally, and I've got like 21,000 followers in like 3 weeks already. So that was kind of cool. We're not doing TikTok for our fire department platform, but I do have a lot of fire department stuff in here with the mayor's blessing. He knows everything I'm doing. He knows I would never make the city look bad. Is there any questions?
There's no questions right now. So if anyone has any questions, type them into the chat. I can read them out.
I could have gone another hour, as you see, but I try to talk as fast as I could.
Yeah, I think the next session starts at 3 o'clock, so we have a few minutes to answer a few questions. Dana Power says, "Thank you, Steve. Great job."
Thank you, Dana.
It was a very interesting topic. Great presentation from Gina. Lucia says, "Fantastic presentation. Thanks for the great overview of PIO." Linda says she learned a lot. Thank you, Steve. Do you have any specific person who proofreads your information before posting? So do you have someone that proofreads your stuff?
I do. We have a captain here that she's got like 3 master's degrees, and she always catches my little grammatical errors. I'm pretty good at English and punctuation, but when you look at your own stuff so long, you just read right over the stuff.
Right.
So she actually reads all my research papers too.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I do.
And do you have a policy? This is my own question. Do you have a policy that the firefighters shouldn't post anything on?
Yes, we do. We have 2 heavy social media policies. One is a standing operating procedure for the fire department. Only the shift commander and myself could actually take photos on scene. The shift commanders can't even post, but only I'm allowed to. I have to verify all that stuff, and it's really quick. They'll send me a photo if I'm not available of a scene. I'll get it out there as soon as possible. But firefighters cannot post themselves because we run into problems with that. And there's a policy because there was a problem.
Right.
So
Dana says we do our active certs are given the ICS 100, 200, 700,
Good.
800 as to advance to the next level of cert within our program.
That's great. That's a great practice.
What is the workload to support social media?
Oh God, it never ends. It never ends. It's even on the weekends, I do it, but I try to map it out, have a schedule of what I'm doing. And always reaching for ideas. And sometimes the guys and gals here will go, hey, what about this? And there's always training here every day. So that's always the option, is getting the photos of the guys and gals training. People love that. They want to see that like I said, their tax money is being spent well and they're prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So we just got a new engine delivered, so they're eating that up. So we love that kind of stuff.
Carl asks, is your posting policy in writing?
Yes, it is. If anybody wants that, I can get those. Just have them forward information to Dana, and I can send them in PDF form to whoever wants them. They are public information, and they're pretty good policies.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate. Hopefully people enjoyed it. Hopefully you didn't see the numbers go down as I was talking. But I enjoyed it. Thank you I'm honored and humbled. Dana, it's great seeing you. Anita, Peter, I will email you that in like a few minutes. Okay.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Take care.
Thank you,
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.